CBSNews.com.
A new investigation by the New York Times is exposing alleged sexual misconduct at Ford auto plants. The paper's reporting explores decades of accusations at two plants in Chicago.
More than 100 current and former employees, as well as industry experts, were interviewed by the Times. Here's what one woman had to say when she came forward.
The day that really sent me over the edge, I was loading a robot, and he walked into the same cell that I'm in and grabs my behind. I turned around to him and I said, "Keep your hands to yourself. As I've told you plenty of times before, I'm not interested."
CBS News contributor Jodi Kantor is a New York Times reporter who's been closely following this story. Her reporting on Harvey Weinstein helped spark the national conversation about sexual harassment, and she joins us now on the set. Jodi, good to see you. I, like many others, saw your tweet from a couple of days ago urging, in fact, people to read the story. And why I thought it was so important after reading it is we've all heard the stories of famous people, the stories that you broke on Harvey Weinstein. And a lot of people perhaps felt that this was relegated to the entertainment industry with famous people or media. But this happens all across America in very mundane industries, including at America's automotive companies. So what more can you tell us about these women who decided to come forward?
So you're absolutely right. It was really important to our team that we look in a completely different area of life. And so my colleagues Susan Chira and Katrin Einhorn did really deep reporting at these Chicago Ford factories. And what they found was such an entrenched culture of harassment, 25 years of allegations, and really, really bad allegations. I would say that the material in this story was as bad as anything else we have seen, even in this year of really disturbing sexual harassment revelations. These are women who basically from the first day of work were put on notice that this was going to be the environment in the plant. They were walking through on an orientation tour and people yelled "fresh meat," and then basically proceeded to treat them that way. Bites on the butt, people yelling out "peanut butter legs," meaning, I want to spread your legs that way. Jokes about paying $5 for oral sex. A woman who said that she actually had to sleep with her supervisor in order to get the schedule that she needed for child care purposes. And so in response to this description of rampant sexual harassment over these years, all of these different methods were tried to deal with it, and none of them were able to stamp the problem out. It just continued. So the story is both an examination of harassment, and then it really asks the question, how do we change this culture? Which I think going into 2018 is the question we're all asking in a way. What is the path forward in the American workplace?
I think what bothered me the most after reading your story was not just the disgusting treatment that these women had to endure, but also that, we talk about the fact that there's a reckoning happening. Well, Ford had a reckoning. They've had several reckonings. There have been several times where a group of women have come together. They've gone to the EEOC. Ford has had to pay millions of dollars. And then things settle down and it goes right back to the way it was before.
Well, I think the question becomes, what are the fundamental structures we use to address this, and do they work? I'll give you an example. Susan and Katrin wrote about the union very powerfully. The union is supposed to protect workers. Well, what does that mean in this situation? What the women say is that the union representatives protected the men who were accused of sexual harassment, that actually even one of the union leaders who was supposed to be dealing with this was himself accused of sexual harassment, and that the women who came forward were treated like the enemy. They were treated like sellouts who were going to hurt the jobs, hurt the plant, hurt other union members' jobs by speaking up. And one of the women said, if this means being a troublemaker, then a troublemaker I shall be.
Well, Ford's president and CEO Jim Hackett issued a letter to employees yesterday where he said, quote, "There is absolutely no room for harassment at Ford Motor Company. There will be no retaliation against anyone who speaks up." But do the women feel that this is a legitimate statement from the CEO?
Well, in fact, we found evidence of retaliation yesterday.
Yesterday?
The story was just published a few days ago. The retaliation basically occurred after the story was published. This is a woman who spoke for the story who still works in one of these plants. And what she said is that after her name appeared in the New York Times, her supervisor cut down her hours.
Wow.
And so she felt she was already being retaliated against for speaking up again. And so then the Ford CEO came in with with his letter. And remember that Ford had not spoken out powerfully and publicly about these allegations over all of these years. And so the letter was a big deal in that the Ford CEO sent this letter to all employees at the company, basically setting the standard and putting people on notice. But now the bigger question is, how do you really prevent retaliation? And what is the accountability mechanism?
That's what I was going to ask. If you just issued the statement, what are you going to do to the supervisor?
We saw this in Nora's reporting on the Air Force Academy, right? It's one thing to say, we're going to support these women, we're going to do training, people should feel comfortable coming forward, fine. But the tougher question is there any accountability for this behavior? Because sadly, what we've seen is that unless people feel that their jobs are on the line, this does not really change.
And also, how do you prevent it from happening altogether so you don't have to worry about issues of retaliation? I mean, is there a plan in place to stop this behavior?
They say they're working on training and prevention.
But they've said that before for over decades.
What would they do differently this time?
Jodi Kantor, I want to really thank you for coming.